With Popeye movies. My mom always knew I wanted a tattoo of an anchor like Popeye's. When you're older, my mom always told me. There were many years when I wasn't sure if I should get the tattoo or not. I finally got a tattoo on my left arm this year, just in time for Halloween. Popeye is interesting because he has a very unique personality, which many people find funny. But those frames that seem harmless hide a series of choices that make violence seem normal in a planned way. And Popeye's spinach, which makes him unbeatable, no longer seems like a simple message about eating well, it feels more like sneaky advertising. What seems like a normal video actually hides a lot of dark secrets about the people who made it. We don't look at Popeye the same way we did when we were kids, in front of the TV on a Saturday afternoon. Let's look back at what seems like a harmless Popeye cartoon from 1933 and take it apart to find the layers of violence, veiled propaganda, and dark production goals that were carefully hidden behind the laughter of kids. 15. Popeye showed up before he could be the main figure. Do you remember the first time you met Popeye? The chances are it wasn't a Popeye video. Not many people knew that Popeye wasn't a star when he first came out. On July 14, 1933, he made his first cartoon appearance in a short film from the Betty Boop series. The movie was made by Fleischer Studios and released by Paramount Pictures. The short film was called Popeye the Sailor. To sell it, though, it was still called a Betty Boop cartoon. It wasn't a mistake. That was a plan. Behind-the-scenes records show that Max Fleischer, the studio's co-founder, agreed to this plan as a low-risk test that would put Popeye in the same light as Betty Boop to see how people would react instead of starting a whole new show. In real life, Betty only shows up for a short time, while Popeye controls the pace with rough action, heavy movement, and comic violence. The results were better than expected. Reports from theaters said that people were much more interested in Popeye than Betty Boop. Later, people who study animation said that this was one of the smartest soft starts ever. Popeye got people's attention right away, without an opening or an explanation. Spinach wasn't just a veggie, it was a power drug used for propaganda. That green crop can make a man punch through anything and make a whole generation believe it. It sounds crazy, but it's hard to argue with the truth. Spinach is not food in Popeye's world. It's a set-off. When you open the can and take a bite, the power goes off right away. When muscles get big, hands become the best way to solve any problem. It's clear what the message is. You will be strong after eating this. But this wasn't just a picture joke. In the 1930s, the Great Depression caused a lot of people in the United States to be malnourished. For the government and public health campaigns to get people to eat more vegetables, especially spinach, which was wrongly thought to be very high in iron because of an old data error caused by a missing decimal point, they needed an easy-to-remember and easy-to-spread symbol. Popeye was the ideal tool because he was funny, had a wide audience, and worked right away. As a result, when Popeye became popular in the US, people ate a lot more spinach. Popeye was used as life proof on posters, nutrition pamphlets, and even in school lessons. After the fact, science fixed the record. Spinach doesn't make you super strong, and the amount of iron it has was lied about. But the message had already gone too far by that time. The most important thing is how that message was delivered. Health was presented as a solution to violence. To live a better life, you are not strong. To win fights, you're strong. It's one of the first cases of advertising that you can't see in a cartoon. A public goal, to get people to eat healthier through fun without labels, disclosure, or warning. 13. In a planned way, violence was made acceptable. If you really look at it, Popeye doesn't fix issues. He ends them with his hands. The story of almost every Popeye comic is told in the same scary way. There is a disagreement. Dialogue doesn't work. Someone opens a can of spinach. There is violence. And order is back. There is no way for Popeye to win. A lot of the time, when he wins, his opponent's body is distorted, knocked out of the frame, or erased in a fit of laughs. The worry is not a single punch, but the trend that keeps happening. Kids don't just see violence, they think it's always right. Every time Popeye gets angry after being pumped up, the cartoon sends a simple but harmful message. You don't have to talk when you're strong enough. Later, media experts said that Popeye was one of the first examples of how violence became normal in animated shows. Violence is never punished or held accountable, and it always leads to laughter, success, and admiration. Kids learn that using physical strength is the fastest way to solve problems. 12. Popeye's soul came from that strange voice. Do you remember it? When Popeye mutters something with his mouth closed and eyes looking sideways, all of a sudden he says something that no one can hear and everyone can feel. Popeye's voice was never meant to sound nice or noble. From the very first time he showed up in 1933, Fleischer Studios went in a completely different way than the polished cartoon characters of the time. Billy Costello, a vaudeville act who goes by the name Red Pepper Sam, made the voice. He didn't say his lines clearly. He spoke through clenched teeth instead. Mumbled and swallowed sounds that made it sound like Popeye was thinking instead of talking. It wasn't a mistake if Fleischer wanted Popeye to feel rough, normal, and flawed, more like a real sailor than a figure on a stage. Costello improvised a lot in the recording room, which made it stand out. He added mutterings, noises that didn't mean anything, and strange beats on his own. They didn't try to make the voice fit the pictures, in fact, they did the opposite. They changed how their mouths moved to match the voice. In the 1930s, this wasn't done very often, which is exactly what made Popeye feel more alive than other figures from the same time. 11. A simple tune that made people remember Popeye. As early as the first frames, Popeye announces himself not with words but with music. Sammy Lerner wrote the music for I'm Popeye the Sailor Man in 1933 especially for Fleischer Studios' animated movies. There is no build-up or complexity, there are only a few repeated lines, a simple melody, and a steady beat. It sticks after just one hearing. That wasn't a mistake. Fleischer thought that music was better at sticking in your mind than pictures. Someone can be lost, but a tune will always be there. It was made so that kids could sing along right away, even if they didn't fully understand the words. It worked. Popeye was already in people's minds before he even showed up. Behind the scenes, the song also helped with a very useful problem in the story. Popeye talked very slowly and hard to understand. They didn't make him speak more clearly, instead, they used the song to describe him as a sailor who was strong and sure of himself and didn't need many words. Animators even timed Popeye's moves to the beat, which made the sound and movement go together perfectly. Melody quickly got away from the theater crowd and was seen in schools and on the streets. At that time, not many animated characters got so much attention and popularity so quickly through song. 10. The type of animation that made it impossible to mistake Popeye for anyone else. Popeye looked very different from all the other cartoon characters when he first came out in 1933. Fleischer Studios used a style of animation called rubber hose, which made the arms and legs move like rubber hoses and didn't pay much attention to accurate anatomy. But they didn't stop at the normal amount for the time. They went a lot further. Some animators, like Roland Crandall and Seymour Neidl, purposely made Popeye's hands look bigger than they were compared to the rest of his body. This was a move made on purpose. People can feel the force of Popeye's punch even if there aren't any complicated violent details. You don't need effects to show strength, form and motion are enough. Behind the scenes, the Fleischer team thought that movement was more important than neat drawings. They cared more about the rhythm and effect of the energy than the consistency of the anatomy. So, Popeye's size might have been off from one shot to the next, but the action always felt real. People didn't notice the flaws because they were too caught up in the movements. That rough, loose style stood out against figures like Betty Boop who were smoother and more glamorous. Popeye didn't fit on a stage that was well kept. He looked like he had just come from a rough world where people really did crash into each other. 9. The borrowed figures who set up the danger right from the start. What do you remember about the picture of Olive Oyl being lifted off the ground while Bluto's huge shadow fills the whole frame? You know what's going to happen before the first punch is thrown. Not many people know this, but Olive Oyl and Bluto were not made to be animated. Both are straight from Else Chrysler Seeger's comic strip Thimble Theater. Olive Oyl has been around for a long time, long before Popeye. Bluto was already a well-known example of a mean bad guy. Fleischer Studios kept the main parts of these characters the same, but changed their looks to make them work in movies. Olive was drawn with a very thin body, which made her bending, stretching, and moving quickly look even more real. Bluto, on the other hand, was animated as a huge force tool. He was heavy and often took up the whole screen when he showed up. Behind the scenes, Bluto quickly turned out to be Popeye's best visible enemy. The difference in size made it clear right away what the fight was: overwhelming strength versus stubborn endurance. Animators staged fights on purpose to show how force can be used against force without having to say it. 8. The sloppy way the movie was made was stamped right on the screen. When you look closely at the early Popeye shorts, it always looks like something is about to fall apart. There is nothing smooth about it. Walls bend floors, figures slam into each other, and walls bend floors. That wasn't just a choice of style, that was how things really were. In the early 1930s, Fleischer Studios was always racing to meet the needs of theaters. Popeye quickly became a big hit at the movies, and almost every month, theaters had to get new cartoons. The result was a very tight plan for production. Some animation writers, like Leonard Maltin and Richard Fleischer, say that many shorts were only made in 4 to 6 weeks. Director Dave Fleischer laid out a clear rule. Clean drawing is less important than movement. Each animation team worked on a different scene of the same movie at the same time. There wasn't time for long edits. The shot stayed even if an arm was too long or a face was crooked between frames, as long as the punch looked funny and strong. There are Fleischer papers at the Library of Congress that show that many scenes were approved after only one review. This sense of urgency gave the event a raw, unique energy. The process of making the movie was also very chaotic, which is why Popeye's world looks so crazy. At the same time, this was very different from how Disney did things, where one scene would be redone for weeks to get the motion just right. 7. The moment when Popeye blew up and became famous. By the sea, you could hear it in the theater. People were laughing before the scene even finished, and there were cheers every time his arms got bigger and he punched someone. In that moment, Popeye stopped being a new figure and turned into a star. By the end of 1933, Popeye had done better than anyone in the cartoon business had thought possible. Paramount Pictures got reports from theater owners saying that people were more interested in Popeye than any other animated figure in the same show. In his book of Mice and Magic, Leonard Maltin wrote that many theaters had to change the order of the movies to show Popeye first because people would leave early if he came on later. Popularity polls from the early to mid-1930s, which were later put together in the Motion Picture Herald, show that Popeye was just as popular as Mickey Mouse for a while, and sometimes even more so. In the eyes of the public, which was almost impossible at a time when Disney was seen as the standard of perfect animation, Fleischer Studios responded very quickly. Max Fleischer thought that Popeye showed that a rough, violent, and unpolished figure could still become a big star in movies. The company turned Popeye into a full-fledged theatrical series right away and sent its best animators to work on the sailor instead of Betty Boop. These animators are known for their strong motion and heavy impacts. 6. Now, care is taken with the early scenes. You know that not all the little details in the old Popeye movies have aged well. Some scenes show visual stereotypes and social attitudes that were popular in the 1930s, but are now seen with a critical eye and are seen as controversial. Because of this, these parts are often cut, blurred, or changed in modern TV shows and re-releases. Fleischer Studios didn't think these things were a problem when the movie was being made. They were just the way people behaved in that time. But animation historians stress how important it is to put these pictures in the right historical context. Even though there is no official proof that the images were meant to hurt, they still had an effect that needs to be recognized. Because of this, some Popeye shorts are rarely shown on major channels today without being cut. Paramount Pictures restoration teams have carefully written down every change that was made to re-releases. This makes the edits themselves an extra layer of historical record. 5. Popeye's creator never worked directly with Fleischer Studios. Els Chrysler Seeger, who made Popeye, never worked directly with Fleischer Studios. He never even set foot in the building, but everyone there had to follow him. Fleischer's artists did not try to make Popeye look better than he did in the comics. They did something much harder. They kept Seeger's spirit alive. They looked at every panel of Thimble Theater to get a feel for Popeye's pace, attitude, and stubbornness, which is very human. So, the Popeye on TV and in movies stayed tough, loyal, and rough. But he had a quiet, inner life below that, just like Seeger had written about him. The year Seeger died, 1938, was just the start of Popeye's fame. It's interesting that the figure didn't stray from where he came from after his creator died. Animation historians often point to Popeye as an example of an animation show that was so true to the comic that it was almost conservative. 4. When someone took over the studio and changed the mood, you could feel something strange. The clouds are not as dark and the shadows are not as harsh. It looks like something has gone missing from Popeye's world. There is a story behind the scenes, but it's not shown on TV. Fleischer Studios lost control for good in 1942. The studio was taken over by Paramount Pictures, which changed its name to Famous Studios. Movies with Popeye kept coming out, but the tone changed from one movie to the next. The animation got smoother, the colors got brighter and more even, and the beat got less jumbled. There were fewer times when it looked like something was about to jump out of the frame. The skewed angles and barely controlled movements that were typical of the Fleischer era slowly went away. It was easy for kids to watch the cartoons this way. But for people who had seen it before, the roughness had become less noticeable. Behind the scenes, well-known companies put stability and efficiency first. Standardized production took place. There was less creative risk. Popeye no longer lived in a world that always seemed like it was about to fall apart. Instead, he lived in one that had been carefully cleaned up. The fact that Popeye lived is amazing. Many characters went away after Popeye was picked up by a studio, but those early shorts with their darker colors and crazier motion still have a feel that can't be really replicated. 3. Why do animation schools still teach with Popeye? There is a scene that might surprise you if you walk into a serious animation class in the US one day. The students sit quietly, the lights are off, and the teacher stands at the back with his or her arms crossed. In the movies, it's not Pixar, it's not New Disney, and it's not Japanese cartoons. In the 1930s, it was shot in black and white and has a lot of scratchy noise. At first, the young kids look up, a little confused. The character is rough, and the drawings are skewed. There is nothing smooth or shiny about them. The teacher doesn't rush to explain, though. When Popeye walks into the frame, his eyes drop, his shoulders hunch, and he clenches his fist. The whole class starts to understand who he is before he even talks. That's the reason Popeye is still here. At places like Cull Arts, the School of Visual Arts, and USC Fleischer era, the Popeye shorts are used as a starting point to teach kids how to tell stories through dance instead of words. Students are told to notice that Popeye's standing pose, a forward step, or a small body lean tells the audience right away whether he is angry, unsure, or about to blow up. Richard Williams, an animation expert, once said that Popeye is a great example of clarity of action, which means that a character's body speaks for them before it opens its mouth. There were no effects or shows, it was just shape and time. Also, a flawed hero who changed the way cartoons think about heroes. Who is this half-pointer? Think about the cartoon heroes that a lot of us watched as kids. Most of them looked good. Upright had a clear voice and always seemed to know what to do. They stood up for what was right and rarely made people feel bad. That was not at all like Popeye. When he first came around, he looked more like a problem than an answer. A strange body with hands that are too big for their bodies and a face that is always scowling. He muttered things that no one could fully understand, lost his temper, and was easily envious. He also often smashed things together to fix problems without thinking about what would happen. The important thing is that Fleischer Studios saw all of those qualities and decided to keep them. Max and Dave Fleischer chose to make their animation less cute and more realistic at a time when that was the trend. They didn't try to make Popeye feel better. They made his roughness part of who he was. This is not a good example of Popeye. He seemed more like a real person than almost any animated figure of the time. Animators like Roland Crandall and Seymour Neidl were very good at what they did. They let Popeye's moves stay clear and quick, and sometimes they were almost violent. It wasn't cute or smooth. Every step and clenched hand showed a life inside that was about to explode. People liked Popeye not because he was the best man, but because he seemed the most real. 1. The 1933 short that was never shown anywhere else. Popeye's first short has not aged as well as most people think it has. It's not just buried in books about animated history, people are still looking for it. Film archives, individual collectors, and animation historians are still looking for prints that are in the best shape possible. The reason is clear and useful. In the early days, cartoons were shown over and over in theaters until the film stock ran out. Then cut, reprinted, changed, and sometimes put back together. Every print that has been found is a fragile piece of history. And when people go back to it, they see why it's important to keep it around. Film shows Fleischer Studios working like a rubber hose at full speed, with extreme poses and jokes that hit the viewer before they can think of a response. No one has the time or patience to clean carefully. Energy is better than style. Positivity is better than perfection. What about you? What is your favorite part of Popeye 1933? Write something. If you want to see more deleted scenes from the golden age of Hollywood movies, don't forget to like, follow, and turn on the bell. There are things Hollywood has kept from you for decades that will surprise you.